Greetings, nutrition students, and happy chapter number 10 already. So here we're going to talk about water. Oh gosh, water is such a fascinating topic. We're going to talk about water and electrolytes. We know most of us understand water as a necessity, but let's kind of explain a little bit about why and maybe how much. So water is an essential nutrient, meaning we can't live without it, right? It is essential to survival. Although you could possibly go 3 weeks without food, any food, you cannot go more than a week, and even that is stretching it without water. You must have water. 60% of our body is actually made up of water, right? Our skin has hydration or water in it. Our cells all have this kind of components of water, solvents and different fluids and electrolytes that help to balance everything is all from kind of water. So the role of water, most of us, when we think of our body and we think of water, we think of urinating, right? And so the role of water in urine is really to carry or transport things, think of like a train or something of that nature. Typically your water is going to pick up the bad stuff, the things that we don't want to keep, the harmful things or the things we don't want to keep in the body. And your urination is how we get rid of that stuff, right? It's how we expel it from the body. And so that is really the primary function or role of water in the urine, right? For our blood, 90% of our blood is actually made up of water. Only 10% is other factors that we need. So water, crucially important. So what does it do for us? Water functions as really kind of when we think of lubricant, think of a lotion or a greaser, right? And then think of something that cleans, or like we said, transports bad stuff out of your system. We want to lubricate all of our joints in order for them to move and to help prevent, ward off arthritis, right? So the fluids that kind of come from water bases are saliva. When we're chewing foods, right, that's all, again, water-based. Our spinal fluid is crucial. And a big thing that water really helps to do is regulate our body temperature. So if we were to go from extreme, so if you flew up to the North Pole and you stepped out of the airport and you were not dressed appropriately, right, that would be an extreme shift in temperature. And your water is going to be crucial in helping your body to adapt or adjust to that temperature. Right? So again, let's talk about some of the roles of water in regulating that body temperature that I just mentioned. So water changes temperature slowly. So that's really what it does, is it helps to maintain our body temperature. So if we go through that extreme, it wants to help the body to adapt, not quickly, because that's going to cause our body to react in very severe ways, but to react slowly. When body temperature rises, let's say we're working out, right? We're doing something that we should be doing, exercising, doing some physical activity. What happens? We sweat. Right? And sweat's actually a pretty good thing. So what's happening there is sweat is the way that your body is taking kind of some of the using water to get some of that excess heat out of the inside of your body, and it's putting it onto the outside of your body, right? So we need to have that sweating process. Low body temperature causes restricted blood flow to the skin to conserve body heat. So again, in order to not go to those extremes of weather, what happens is water actually helps to slow down your blood flow, right? So our blood is pumping through our body and through our veins. And what it does is as we get into this kind of extreme cold weather, our blood slows down so that because it's trying to maintain and hold on to the heat that we currently have in our body. So you'll want to remember or know those three things of the ways that water is really used to regulate our body temperature. Hydrolysis and condensation, again, you're kind of going to read here about how water is used in these different processes. If you're, again, looking towards chemistry and things of that nature, this is all fascinating. Osmosis. So what's osmosis? It's this process by which we can take, as you see in the picture, kind of a whole food or a whole substance, and that substance can, be blended or can cross through different stages. It can go from its whole form to its liquid form. And that's what water helps to do, because water, as we see here, water in the body, that osmosis process allows water to move in and out of our cells. to move freely throughout our body. And other different macronutrients and different things that we've talked about can't do that. They can't get into certain cells, or they can't go certain places. And so water is one of those things that is able to be used in many different ways because of that osmosis process. So maintaining a water balance, this is what we need to make sure we're doing. So water intake, right? We need to have enough water in our actual drinking or intake of water. And then our food contains water. And then in that metabolism process of breaking down our foods, we have water. And then of course, output would be our urinating. It would be our sweating or evaporating of our liquids. And then our feces contains a certain amount of liquid, and water is the basis for that. So a lot of people will say, well, how much water should we drink? We know that on average, pretty much the guideline is going to be 8 glasses a day. So how many of you actually get 8 glasses a day, right? How many of you get more than 8 glasses a day? So I'm a huge water drinker because there's just huge health benefits in drinking water. It's really difficult to drink too much water. So I try to actually drink, I use this like every day. This is my gallon. So it's a 1 gallon jug. And so what I do is I actually fill it up, and I like room temperature water because room temperature water is actually adapts to your cells a little better. And so I enjoy that more than I do cold water. And so I fill up my gallon jug here, and then I keep it by my nightstand. And I just really try to make sure that in 24 hours I'm drinking that whole jug. And so that's 128 ounces. So it's actually like 16 glasses instead of the 8 glasses that we recommend. Sometimes, again, if you're exercising more, you drink more water. But that's my goal because, again, lots of benefits when we talk about like what water can do for you. Make sure to look at this slide to figure out which of our foods contain more water. And most of us, when we think about, well, how do I know when to drink water? We think of being thirsty, right? We think of when we feel that sense that, oh man, my mouth is dry. What's going on? So this slide is really interesting because this is what's happening, right? So that thirst, the brain is really interacting to signal that, something is going on here. I don't have enough liquid water to do the different things that I need to do in the blood and my cells and throughout. So therefore, the mouth becomes really dry because that water is not available. And so it makes that saliva. And then together, our dry mouth and our brain motivate us to go, oh, gee, I have that dry feeling in my mouth. Let me drink water. And then we drink water. And then again, that is going to increase our blood volume. It's going to put more liquid into our blood pumping throughout our body. It's going to restore some balance, which is what we want. So when you get to the point where you actually notice that I'm thirsty, my mouth is dry, that's actually beyond when you should be drinking water. In other words, if you maintain water balance by, say, just knowing that I have a glass before I have breakfast, I have a glass, at break time, I have a glass right before lunch, and with my lunch I have a glass, or you plan out when you drink your water, then you won't really experience that thirst. Because it's like you're actually providing your body with the water it needs before your body has to signal you that I need water. I'm thirsty, I need it, right? So that's preferable. A really good indicator for you to know whether or not you're getting enough water to do the jobs it needs to do is this slide. So think of when you urinate. Most of us kind of know and understand that sometimes you go to the bathroom when you urinate and you're like, whoa, I really smell uric acid, right? That's what we don't want. Right? So if we look at this slide, you can see that the clearer your urine, ideally we want your urine to run almost clear, right? But the clearer it is, meaning the whiter or the less yellow your urine is, the better. Because that means that you're actually hydrating yourself enough that your body is having an easy time processing. It's really cleaning out, again, it's transporting the bad stuff we don't want out of your system, right? As we look at this slide, we see that kind of middle yellow, which means we're dealing with some dehydration. And then as we see the bottom picture here, we're seeing, full on, like this is the one that really smells like uric acid. It's saying, I need more water, right? I need to liquidate, I need to diffuse that uric acid and that smell, and you're going to urinate more frequently. The thing is, the more water you drink, your body adapts to how often you have to go to the bathroom. And so your body will start to adapt to a larger volume or increase in the amount of water that you're drinking. So your body needs water. You don't want to let your body, get dehydrated. Frequently, let's say you get a foot cramp. You get this cramp in your foot or in your leg or somewhere like that, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I have a Charlie horse. Oh my gosh, right? I would tell you to guzzle water. Drink water. Take a full big glass and just drink water as much as you can, even if you don't feel thirsty. Because what's going to happen again is that water is going to be able to fly and to, lubricate, to speed up the flow of blood. And your foot is cramping and it needs that. It needs that blood flowing through quickly, and you will drink the water and all of a sudden you're going to feel your foot, just the cramp is going to release and go away, right? So again, your body was really signaling you that I need more water. So electrolytes. Electrolytes are these kind of positive and negatively charged ions that conduct electricity really in different solutions, or I want to say different types of proteins or things we have going on in the body. There's 3 different ones that we really talk about here: sodium, potassium, and chloride. And they're all essential. We need all 3 of these electrolytes because they really help that distribution of water. They're kind of like the helpers, the aids that help water to do what it needs to do. So when we process our foods, we've already talked about how natural foods are wonderful. They're ideal. However, most of us in America don't get only natural foods. So our food processing actually affects our sodium and potassium levels. If you look at the slides here, you're going to see on the top slide, you see the less processed foods. And you see for sodium is the blue. And you'll see very little or small blue lines, meaning that these foods, these natural foods, have less sodium. Then you go to the bottom slide and you see the more processed foods. And you look here and you're like, okay, look at the blue lines. And the blue lines are saying this is where sodium goes in the processing. So most of the salt that we consume is actually added during that processing and manufacturing stage of foods, right? Although many of us have a problem or are what we call very heavy-handed with the table salt, right? And therefore we're thinking that we're adding most of our salt. Actually, we're not. There's more salt if you're eating processed foods. Just start reading labels. Yeah, make sure we'll talk about blood pressure because salt or sodium really increases blood pressure, and blood pressure is never a good thing to have. We want to stay at that 120/80 of mercury when we go to the doctor and they tell you your numbers. Sodium deficiency and electrolyte deficiency and toxicity, not too many worries here. When we say the UL, remember UL refers to upper limits, or it's really those limits that we don't want to kind of go beyond. And so for salt or sodium, it is 2,300 milligrams per day. You all are going to be memorizing that number, and you're going to be seeing a lot of that number because that is part of your diet study. In your diet study, we're looking at how much sodium you are getting in your diet, because you're going to flip when you see how much you get. Most of us get well beyond the recommendation for our sodium level. So we'll find out soon enough. Right, so again, hypertension is high blood pressure. And so high blood pressure is this increase in the pressure of blood, again, in our arteries. Remember, our arteries are providing our heart with this blood and oxygen that it needs, and it's flowing through there. And so what's happening though here is that it's having to work harder, and there's this pressure against the walls, which is not a good thing. Remember, we said we don't want there to be any type of blood clots or any type of things that lead to stroke and heart disease and heart attacks. But unfortunately, salt is a big contributor. So diets that are high in salt or sodium have been linked to hypertension or high blood pressure. Hypertension affects 1/3 of us, right? So like 33% of adults in America have hypertension. This is something that can really be changed by diet, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Risk factors, some of us are just predisposed. We had our ancestors or our relatives that had hypertension, so we have a genetic propensity to have that. Our diet, definitely. If you eat foods high in sodium, that's what you're going to happen. Obesity, ethnicity. So fortunately, our African American, our Pacific Islanders, and our Asians are the 3 groups that are at highest risk for developing hypertension, like at more than 40% risk of developing hypertension. Diabetes, age, smoking, stress, alcohol, and limited physical activity. So these are all risk factors in getting hypertension. And our lifestyle choices here. So your lifestyle choices, talking again about water and electrolytes, right? Making sure that you're drinking enough. I know for some people this is really difficult. My mom, as I mentioned, is a type 2 diabetic, and she's very tiny. She probably weighs 100 pounds. She's under 5 feet. So she doesn't really have a weight issue. However, I have to really be on her case about drinking water. You're diabetic. We need to be drinking water. If you have a choice between water and juice, you pick the water, don't pick the juice, right? And so she doesn't like water. I had one of my daughters who didn't like water either. And so what I would get is, they sell it at Costco. I'm sure they sell it at the store. It's like called Propel, but it's like a flavored water, or it's some water that has electrolytes in it or something. But, think of what you can. That's what I do for my mom too, is I get her water, and then they have that lemon you can add kind of to the water to make it taste better. But figure out some creative solutions to get your family members and you to be drinking water. The DASH diet. So the DASH diet is different from other diets in the sense that the purpose of the DASH diet is to help people to not get hypertension or high blood pressure. And so therefore, if you compare the DASH diet for 2,000 calorie diet compared to the MyPlate recommended diet for 2,000 calories, they're different because DASH is going to have less sodium. It's recommending a difference here in what you're eating. So if you have family members who are dealing with hypertension, that kind of thing, this is a really good, outline for you to look at and explore. And again, here's some really, really good advice for those of you in this course who are interested in making some changes in your diets or in others. How can we get less sodium in our diet? So definitely just start, when you did your food label activity, right? Just starting to read labels helps you to become educated. And you look at the label and you're like, oh my goodness, this has like 200% of my recommended sodium for the day, right? So reading labels, that's going to help you. Chips are just, they're not healthy for you. Very few kinds are. There are some that are okay, but in general, choosing fresh and frozen vegetables instead of the can. So just think, anytime we put something in a can, it usually has some type of liquid preservative, and that is going to be a highly have a high sodium content to it. When we cook, this is a tough one because I like to do this, right? When we cook, we shouldn't add salt to our, cooking. So for instance, if you're making spaghetti or you're making rice or you're making something, sometimes we'll add for flavoring, add some salt into the boiling water. And I'll have to work on that. But that's a hard one for me because I like the flavor. Instead, flavoring your foods with some of the options here: lemon juice, onion or garlic powder, curries, right? Thyme. So seasonings other than salt, which a lot of us just aren't exposed to. But if you try it, you might like it. So limit your table salt use at, when you're eating. My youngest daughter just reaches for salt without even tasting food. And I've had to work on not letting her do that. Like, actually, we need to taste the food because it may not need salt, right? And so limiting that table salt use. Replacing some of our high foods like ham, bologna, corned beef with the lower sodium foods. Cut down on cheese, especially processed cheese. And really, most of us in America eat processed cheese. When you get your American Kraft singles or whatever, those are processed cheeses. And so that's typically what we eat. A big one is going to be the sauces that we add to our meats or other foods. So when you have soy sauce is a big one for sodium. barbecue sauce, ketchup, mustard, these all have high sodium. So it doesn't mean you can never use them, but limit them. Limit how often you use them, and then limit the amount that you're putting on. And then when eating out, oh, this is a big one. Ask for your sauces on the side, right? So that you can determine how much to add, and it's not just kind of smothered or slathered in sauce. Ask that foods be prepared without salt, and then you could add it if you want to flavor, or just limiting fast food, because fast food has a lot of sodium and salt. So it doesn't mean we can never have fast food, but if you have it daily, if you have it, even every other day, those kind of things, not good for you. So this is a really good way to start making some changes in your diet. And then again, I'll leave you to go through and learn a little more by going through our clicker slides at the end of the chapter. And I will see you then for chapter 11.